This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day.
This is Professor Jeffrey Sachs. He's an American economist. He's also a professor at Columbia University. In the 1980s and 1990s, he was one of the experts who helped the USSR and former Soviet countries transition from communist-controlled economies to open market ones. And he is now justifying Vladimir Putin's claim that Russia's attack on Ukraine was in fact self-defense.
This started in 1990, February 9th, 1990, James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward.
I have the transcripts of that conversation right here, but it's mostly about the reunification of East and West Germany. February of 1990 was a pretty rough time for the Soviet Union because just recently the Berlin Wall fell along with the Soviet Union's iron grip on Eastern Germany. The Soviet Union did not want two things. They did not want a neutral and unified Germany, and they also did not want a unified Germany in NATO. Here is what Baker said. If we maintain a presence in Germany that is a part of NATO, there would be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction for forces of NATO 1 inch to the east. And that is the premise of Putin and all of the other idiots who are defending him. But Professor Sachs and all of the other pundits are omitting one key detail. This statement was made by Secretary of State James Baker when the USSR still existed, right here, and then the Warsaw Pact existed just to the west of them, which abutted NATO. In February of 1990, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria were part of the Warsaw Pact. So if NATO expanded into Poland, that would be an imminent breach of the Warsaw Pact, and that would invoke a declaration of war. So this verbal assurance was not made with Russia. It was made with a completely different government, the USSR. And what happened to the USSR in 1991? Oh, it completely dissolved, along with the Warsaw Pact. And that verbal assurance was made by George Herbert Walker Bush's Secretary of State. It means nothing because a verbal agreement by one president's administration is not legally binding by any form of international law for the next presidential administration, especially by Bill Clinton's, which was a Democrat's. There was no agreement made about NATO expansion just in case the USSR collapsed, and if there was a promise to be made about NATO never expanding, that would have had to have been a formalized treaty, which there never was. The treaty that was made is called the Treaty on the Final Settlement with Respect to Germany, also known as the 2+4 Agreement. You can find all of this information on the National Security Archive, and I have read several hundred pages of every conversation between Russian officials and Americans during this time. That treaty had 9 articles, and not one of them mention a non-expansion of NATO beyond Germany in the event of a USSR collapse. And within the entirety of the discussion between USSR, NATO, and American officials, the Soviets' biggest concern was Germany becoming strong enough to attack the USSR once again. Other points of concern were the revolution in Lithuania and the other Baltic states, which the USSR refused to recognize as free, nuclear non-proliferation, and of course, getting financial help from America as Russia underwent perestroika. Perestroika was a stage in Russia's glasnost policy, which just means openness, and perestroika was the transition from Russia's or the Soviets' centrally planned economy to a free market one. Sorry to burst the bubble of the uneducated tankies, but no, NATO's expansion beyond Germany was a non-issue. And Mikhail Gorbachev himself, the president of Russia at the time, said the topic of NATO expansion was not discussed at all, and it wasn't brought up in those years. It was more about NATO's military structures not advancing and would not be deployed on the territory of the then GDR, which is just East Germany. And again, that assurance was made with the Soviet Union, which is a government that no longer existed past 1991. And if the USSR was still in power in the 90s or the early 2000s, I bet you none of those Eastern European countries would have been invited to NATO. So next time somebody with zero critical thinking skills tries to tell you that Russia's invasion was due to NATO's aggressive expansion and breaking of a treaty, just ask them, who were the leaders at the time? What governments made this agreement? And then I want you to ask them this. Does any verbal assurance under the Biden administration have to hold true in the upcoming Trump administration? Have fun watching those nitwits react. I am the Geo Husar. I want to make a multi-part series all about this, but I need your engagement. I need you guys to share, repost, comment, like, and save this. So thanks for watching.